So welcome everyone to the Buddhist Path of Awakening, our weekly class. Tonight we're going to be discussing Chapter 11, Indestructible Wakefulness, and Laura is going to present. So Laura, take it away.
Thank you. There is an experience of basic ground that is tough, solid, inspirational. It isn't an experience of storing up or making ego more solid. It isn't collecting, clinging, analyzing, protecting. Passion, aggression, and ignorance don't operate here. Rather, this state has the quality of indestructible wakefulness. It is uncompromisable wakefulness filled with confidence, pride, and heroism. It is ultimate bodhichitta. Ultimate or absolute bodhichitta is powerful, monumental. It isn't a process that starts and stops, but an ongoing, beginningless experience. One doesn't have to be awakened because in this state, fundamentally, you've never gone to sleep. Trungpa Rinpoche uses the example that we might want to be like George Washington, to transplant George Washingtonness into ourselves. This would be like relative bodhicitta. Ultimate bodhicitta is saying, we don't want to just have qualities of our first president. We ourselves can be president. Trungpa Rinpoche says, the difference is one of aspiration as opposed to actuality. It's the difference between being a would-be Buddha and having the essence, the heart, and the mind of wakefulness in you already. So with relative bodhicitta, our aspirations and our efforts to make ourselves compassionate, gentle human beings, they have to be manufactured. Whereas with ultimate bodhicitta, we don't have to make an effort to develop it. In fact, there's only one thing in the way of experiencing ultimate bodhicitta. We don't think it's here. We stay with our indolent, clumsy, rolling around in samsara. Trungpa Rinpoche said, we have to learn to cheer up. We are so meek and so poor that we have not yet touched our possibility of pleasure, our possibility of attaining enlightenment, or even a little taste of what it could be. It isn't just pain that we want to avoid. We often aren't awake to pleasure as it shows up in our world. We push away our direct experience of pleasure as well as pain. We could switch our allegiance from searching and indulging in samsaric pleasures, pleasures that deaden us or take us away. We could switch to engaging and celebrating the pleasures found in our direct experience of right now. To feast in the present moment, we need to open up. This is difficult to do. Western culture supports closing down around our own self-interests. Trungpa Rinpoche says, since the Industrial Revolution, we've been very caught up with ourselves, celebrating independence and individual achievement as an overriding value in our culture. This tangles us up into staking out our territory, defending it, clinging to our individuality. we attempt to cultivate that which might make us stand out as special. This requires aggressively defending any small island of something we think of as our unique discovery or contribution, be it an opinion, a clothing style, or even a pride in the uniqueness of our neuroses. We can even cling to the specialness of our problems compared to everyone else's. We close off, constructing boundaries and borders, pursuing and protecting our self-interest. This over-concern with ourselves, with our individuality, with our achievements, with our own immediate needs, is the opposite of what Trungpa Rinpoche calls decency. The opposite of opening up to the big wakeful vision of ultimate bodhicitta. When we can open up, trusting our Buddha nature, trusting our spiritual friend, we begin to see obscurations of our fundamental goodness as temporary. We begin to see them as just clouds obscuring the sun of our Buddha nature, just fleeting clouds temporarily blocking the sunlight of bodhicitta. Trusting our fundamental goodness, and through our mindfulness practice, we start to develop bare attention or heedfulness and a kind of recollection, recognition, or intrinsic knowing. These qualities Trungpa Rinpoche calls the prerequisite for arousing absolute or ultimate bodhicitta. To arouse ultimate bodhicitta in the Mahayana, we bring our mindful precision of shamatha practice and the total awareness of vipassana together. We bring them together to our lives on and off the cushion. And then, living openly and authentically, we can experience the heroism within ultimate bodhicitta. This heroism doesn't meet aggression with aggression, and not being thrown off balance by attempting to throw counterpunches. Bodhisattva heroism is grounded, tough as well as gentle. But being open and heroic doesn't mean pouring out or spilling into the world whatever you're thinking. Being open doesn't mean we share our secrets in a reactive way. According to Trungpa Rinpoche, this cheapens ourselves and pollutes the world with unnecessary plot lines, drama, chaos. Sharing our stories or secrets isn't heroic openness. It isn't part of ultimate bodhicitta. The experience of ultimate bodhicitta has the qualities of gentle wakefulness, threefold purity, and unconditional compassion. The gentleness of the bodhisattva comes from letting go of aggression, letting go both of aggressive intentions we have toward others and toward ourselves. It comes from dropping our rejection of the present moment. Letting go, wanting this moment to be not this. Letting go of wanting this moment to be made up of something else or somewhere else or some other time. Aggression is the non-acceptance of things as they are. It's the mindset or behavior that arises from imposing one's view on what is here. Trungpa Rinpoche says, deciding to abandon aggression and its activities is the fundamental definition of Bodhi or wakefulness. You're gentle, and the more gentle you become, the more wakefulness happens. The more awake one becomes, the less willing one is to cause harm to self or other sentient beings. We're gentle with the present moment rather than pushing against or resisting it. And when we do discover we're being aggressive, we're gentle with that. Gentle being with ourselves, awake to our own aggression. Gentle here doesn't describe moderate in action, but a quality of awakened being. It doesn't mean that we're to let go of everything that feels wrong in the world. It doesn't mean that gentle intent that always translates into gentle actions. Being gentle, not hating on ourselves and others, allows us to move more skillfully through the world. So in this sense, gentle means capable. And this might not look like gentle action. The Buddha taught that in some cases, enlightened activity practiced for the benefit of sentient beings could include subjugating or destroying. John gave us an example last week of a student whom Trungpa Rinpoche threw out of the Sangha. Not exactly a gentle act. He threw him out, not because he was annoying or confusing others with his disingenuousness and twisting of the Dharma, but is the only way left for Trungpa Rinpoche to get through to him. The only clear communication or action Trungpa Rinpoche could take that the student wouldn't be able to twist into a misconception. Gentleness as a quality of being is not strived for, but it permeates one's beings when one abandons aggression and opens up to what's happening now. In this way, gentleness is wakefulness. In the word bodhichitta, we're combining these aspects to describe one's heart or enlightened mind as gentle awake. With gentle awake heart or mind, you have the sense of hominess, the sense of being at home in your own direct experience. You aren't rejecting or struggling against it. There's a sense you can trust and relax with what is. Your senses, other people, your world are recognized as workable as they are. And with this confidence toward what arises in your world, tenderness comes. And then feeling tender rather than irritated with how things are or are not, we begin to feel cheerful, more awake. But being cheerful and awake does not mean insensitivity to suffering in the world. Being more fully awake brings more acute awareness of the pain and suffering of others. Being in tune with others and not running away or avoiding pain means the gentle, awake heart feels more, not less. This kind of suffering is helpful and necessary. Trungpa says it's like the discomfort a parent feels if their child cries. Feeling the ache of our common humanity motivates the Bodhisattva to work for others. Currently, we're witnessing this with hundreds of US veterans and other private citizens individually doing whatever they can to get their interpreters and others out of harm's way in Afghanistan. Perhaps a collective distress at their vulnerability to the brutality of the Taliban supports the resources and political will to rescue them. There is another kind of suffering, however. Suffering that arises when we can't maintain or store up our ego. Suffering when others or the world are not changing in ways we want them to. Suffering that leads us to deflate and collapse down around our pain. This kind of suffering doesn't serve us or others. This second sort of suffering unnecessarily burdens ourselves. Trungpa Rinpoche dismisses it as this kind of suffering as somewhat of a nuisance. There could be a pause and a curiosity. What kind of suffering is this? What is my immediate direct experience of my suffering? Is it, for example, something like a blocked, tight restriction? Or something like being trapped in a circular, heady argument with myself? Or perhaps it feels like a ragged, sore, tender wound. Am I being awakened to useful suffering, or am I getting stuck in suffering that doesn't serve anyone? Awakening and slowing down to the felt sense of pain and wrongness could give birth to a recognition of what would be more right. A movement toward authenticity and genuineness. Bodhichitta has threefold purity. Threefold purity means that actor, action, and object of action don't exist as separate independent entities. As Trungpa Rinpoche puts it, there is no you as an actor, there is no action, and there is no one to be acted upon. To put this in terms of English grammar, there is no subject, verb, or object in the sentences of our living. Holding this principle of threefold purity in the context of relative bodhicitta takes you away from wanting to assign blame or credit to yourself and others. You're less interested in the story of who did what to whom, who was right, who was wrong. Not seeing the other as someone to be acted upon, as neither conquest nor competitor, you relate to others with more genuine warmth and strength. Once you enter the realm of non-duality with absolute bodhicitta, threefold purity is reflected by the sense of very little territoriality, no boundaries. There's nothing to defend and no one to defend it or defend it from. Non-duality of absolute bodhicitta means there's no separate actor or receiver, so no action can be taken by or to something. Trungpa Rinpoche's example is, if I'm going to kill you and I don't exist, you don't get murdered, and the act of murder doesn't occur. There is no action if there is no giver and no receiver. Threefold purity isn't a practice itself, but something that arises from all the practice we do in the Mahayana. It is immediate, on the spot, simultaneous. Actions that come from this place come from warmth and openness. There is no territory to be defended, so we can be open. We're not being attacked by our world as we're of it, and we can feel warmth and be warmth. And as there's less territoriality, there's more liberation, more freedom. Rather than a constant backdrop of full catastrophe in our daily lives, when we soften up and let go of our territory, there are fewer obstacles. So now we can see our obstacles more clearly. Not so enmeshed. We can directly examine our experience of obstacle. Be with our experience of them. And seeing them more clearly, less submerged and immersed with them, we have the space to move more freely. And experiencing the obstacles more clearly, we can better notice the whiff or strong scent of territorialism still arising. Trungpa Rinpoche says the experience of territoriality reminds you that you're practicing at a primitive level rather than an enlightened one. And that reminder takes place constantly. Ultimate bodhicitta is the exploration of karuna, the noble heart of compassion, the exploration of unconditional compassion. We don't have a potential for unconditional compassion. It's within us already. A softness, an intelligent, brilliant gentleness. Compassion without strain of aggression or ignorance. In our exploration of the heart of compassion, unconditional compassion, there is something underneath, even feelings of sadness and despair. Trungpa Rinpoche says, if we look at ourselves fully and thoroughly, we will find fundamental goodness. There is something that makes us look up at the blue sky or the clouds or the sun. Something that makes us polish our shoes and press our clothes. When we wake up in the morning, there's something that allows us to brush our teeth, comb our hair, use a bar of soap. Such actions might seem rather ordinary, but they come from a very powerful instinct. That sense of workability comes from ultimate bodhicitta. Arousing ultimate bodhicitta begins with developing relative bodhicitta, our commitment to a practice of mindfulness and awareness. Soften us so we start to be imbued with a gentler, kinder mindset toward ourselves and our world. With relative bodhicitta, we start to understand how the world works without a horse in the race. We can start to understand that there's something else besides living centered around, organized, directed by our own needs and pleasures. Gradually, the solidness, the drive, the hold of ego, it loosens. Then arousing absolute bodhicitta is just a shift into a place, which is, as Trungpa Rinpoche says, free from reference point, free from struggle, and free from goal orientation. Efforting is relinquished. We stand in a place of openness and receptivity. Compassion is experienced anew, not as a feeling sorry for another. That's compassion from ego's perspective. Compassion is now experienced as the willingness to open up and embrace obstacles, to open up and embrace our own suffering and suffering in the world, to open up and trust a spiritual friend who points toward path, to embrace obstacles as stepping stones on our path. We see clearly with gentle vision and open up. And what does Trungpa Rinpoche mean by free from reference point? Without reference point, we're not attempting to find something we already know to categorize this moment or to associate it with a conceptual understanding of past or possible future. Non-reference point feels like Trungpa Rinpoche's good news, bad news joke that we love to recall here. At least I've said it multiple times. I know John has. The bad news is you're falling. The good news is there's no ground. Only there really is no bad news. It might feel like bad news to ego, who wants to hold on, wants to label, to explain, to classify the moment. But the holding on gets in the way of experiencing the true reality of no ground. Shifting into the state of non-reference point, there is no hope, no fear. There is a sense of relief. You don't have to react with your usual habitual conditioning. You're not taking your new experience, this moment, and classifying it as something you experienced before. Rather than trying to pin something down or mentally skidding over this as an instant of that, with this kind of aware compassion, there's instead a sense of non-restriction, a sense of expansion. To the ego, this can feel like free fall. An ego can attempt to jerk us back with a conceptual bungee cord. Or there's a letting go into the space. And as Trungpa Rinpoche says, you can begin to experience something beyond cognition or recognition. Instead of just going deeper, you begin to expand outward. Things perceived by the sense consciousness become very vivid. But you do not just store them in a memory bank. You expand beyond that. You start to feel a sense of ease, warmth, comfort. This experience of expanded liberation might be just a short glimpse. You take it in not by grasping, but by continuing to arouse the mindfulness and a wakefulness of relative bodhicitta. But the glimpse provides support to continue to work with ourselves and with others with gentle, awake heart. To conclude, basically, relative bodhicitta has a reference point. Absolute bodhicitta does not. Relative bodhicitta is kindness, softness, gentleness, still has a whiff or scent of conditioning. Absolute or ultimate bodhicitta does not. Relative bodhicitta is the understanding of how things work without ego. Absolute bodhicitta is the experiencing of egolessness. Trungpa Rinpoche says, with relative bodhicitta, there's a question of who is helping whom. But with absolute bodhicitta, there is no such question. Generosity simply pours out of your whole being. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. In conclusion, I'd like to do a meditation together. If everyone would take a good posture, eyes open. You can take a look at whatever you like, perhaps your computer screen or something above or below it. Your gaze is open, natural, relaxed. This is absolute bodhicitta. The awareness of this space, with whatever phenomena happen to be presenting to you. These sounds coming out of this mouth, the sights that meet your eye, and anything else. It's completely relaxed, effortless. It's there all the time. Thoughts come and go, and this remains. Switching our loyalty from the sorrows and anxieties of thought to this open awareness. This is switching one's loyalty to bodhicitta, awakened mind. I want to say you could relax now. We could have a discussion.
Thank you, Laura. John, it's Randy and Laura. I was thinking when we were talking about awakening to all this softness and gentleness and kindness, that initially that was going to lead to a vulnerability. But I find that it seems to be almost the opposite, like an invincibility, that if you get to the threefold purity and the heroism that, and you lose a reference point, then actually you're the proud warrior and there is no more ego. It's not, oh, I'm vulnerable, it's I'm invincible. Is that somewhat accurate?
Laura?
You might, when you're open to what is here, discover vulnerability. It's not like we leave relative view behind and only have absolute view. But from an absolute point of view, yeah, I think that's right. That there isn't a me to worry about, right?
I think you've got it, Randy. It's
Well, I
not,
appreciate what Laura says, that it's not one or the other. I think they can exist
yeah,
simultaneously, as it were. You don't lose one and gain the other. There's a time and a place for all of it, I suppose. Relative and absolute.
yeah. I think bodhicitta is invincible. It's impregnable, without having any barrier, without having any armor. It's just this. He says, the opening to this chapter is, to me, is stunning. He says, it's an experience that is beginningless, as in unconditional Buddha nature. You are already fully developed. You do not need to be awakened. Then he says, the idea of relative Buddha nature was created for those who need encouragement. Ultimate bodhicitta means that you are eternally awake. It's our nature. It's going on all the time. From the before the beginning to after the end, it never stops. This constant awakened mind. He says, ultimate bodhicitta means that you are eternally awake. It means that fundamentally, you have never gone to sleep. Whether you are asleep or awake, eating your breakfast, lunch, or dinner, whatever you are doing, you are always awake. This is ultimate bodhicitta. We can't shut it off. Ego can't, if it wanted to. It's just non-stop, unstoppable. Something new every instant. Well,
Thank you. And John, um, this is very touching, actually. I was surprised when I read this part, and I was initially confused about the aliyah or aliyah when he says entering the state without reference points is referred to as going into the state of aliyah, the storehouse consciousness. The state does not have any particular hope and fear. And then, it goes on. Oh, that's interesting. It brings a sense of relief and freedom. And I've always kind of pulled back from the storehouse, thinking there's something I don't want from that storehouse. I have to resist it. So the thought of having freedom, release in wakefulness, and this expansion to say it's constantly changing. And there isn't necessarily anything bad about what's in that storehouse. So I'm having to all of a sudden shift my loyalty. And this teaching is just pointing that out to me. Or maybe I'm supposed to do something more with the aliyah. Not sure. Any comments?
Well, I was going to say that confused me too, actually. And I talked about it with John, and he thought that maybe the editor had confused aliyahs there between the aliyah that is the fabric of reality and the aliyah that is the storehouse of our kleshas. But what you said, I thought was a very interesting way of working with it, because you're not pushing it away from anything. You know, you're not pushing, you're not fearful of the aliyah. You're not like, this is something I have to avoid or get rid of. And that leading to, in a sense of liberation and expansion, you're not struggling against something.
Thank you.
Hi, Valerie. My reading of that was the difference between, aliyah or storehouse consciousness that has the reference point, and the one that's clear seeing just as it is. There can be a storehouse consciousness of seeing things as they are, or there can be a storehouse consciousness of seeing things as happening to me. That's how I put it together while I was reading it.
Yeah, I think there are two ways the word aliyah is used in the teachings. It's a little confusing. On the one hand, it's used as a synonym for the absolute, one aspect of the absolute, and it refers to the fact that in this space that we inhabit, all of the phenomena are arising and passing away. They're all, here in the space: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, mental objects. The other aliyah, the way the aliyah is used, is in connection with the word consciousness, vijnana in Sanskrit, aliyah vijnana. And there it has a samsaric quality. It's an aspect of confused mind. It's the eighth of the 8 consciousnesses. And there, as Laura said, it's the storehouse of our habitual tendencies, our kleshas, our defilements that lie in dormant as seeds until something triggers them into consciousness. And I think that here, Trungpa Rinpoche was, well, I'm not sure. I can't remember how he used it. Was he using it in the absolute sense? Laura? Yeah?
I think so, but
Yeah. In the absolute.
Valerie came up with an interpretation that works too.
Well, he does say here, entering the state without reference points is referred to as going into the state of aliyah,
Without
the storehouse consciousness.
So the absolute, yeah.
Yeah, but then it's not. Then they don't use the word consciousness with it. They just use aliyah. When we talk about without reference points. So that's why I think this chapter got a little confused. But we could move on. Just a minor point in the chapter. Who else?
Judith.
Yeah, right in that first paragraph, the middle paragraph on the first page, 89, I was trying to understand let's see. In this particular monumental state of existence, the ground has become very tough and uncompromising. It could be said to be the black and blueness of wakefulness, which nobody can hamper or interfere with. What isn't black and blue like bruises? What I don't get it.
Well, for me, that metaphor is it can take it all, you know. It can get through a fight. It's indestructible. It's tough. So, you know, black and blue in the sense of going through whatever, but not being destroyed. I don't know how other people take that.
Yeah, beat up. Somehow it could be said to be the
maybe, but it's the victor. You know, like it's you can't wipe it out. This
guy. You can't wipe it out in this particular.
This awareness in the present moment, you can't affect it. You can't beat it up. You can't. It's tough, uncompromising. Here it is. It just goes on and on. The contents of it change, but even that changing is unstoppable. It's just a continual presentation in the present moment. Our thoughts about it are completely subject to being beaten up. You know, they are not tough and uncompromising. Our thoughts are very qualified and very frail and very tentative and very only partially true. Always.
Yeah.
This that we are sitting in the middle of all the time, this awareness with everything that it's aware of, is utterly, as he puts it, monumental, a monumental state of existence, tough and uncompromising and wakeful. Nobody can tamper with that wakefulness. Nobody can tamper with this wakefulness that we all experience. It's such an amazing statement. And we've got it all the time. It's always here. It just gets covered over by our self-doubt. It's like those are like clouds that block the sun temporarily, and then they're gone. Those moments of self-doubt. And meanwhile, the sun never leaves the sky.
Right. Oh, I want to thank Laura for her wonderful interpretation. It was just thrilling, and it got to me in a way that reading it did not.
Oh,
So thank you so much.
thank you, Judith. Thank you for the encouragement.
Oh, thank you for the same.
I had a question, John. I'm finding that this whole thing of like when you were having us sit there and do that meditation for a few minutes, for me, I'm finding that it takes, like I don't have an experience, and it's not the first time I've done that exercise with you. I don't have an experience of whatever you're talking about, like of that, and I'm finding that it's requiring quite a bit of faith for me to believe that what you all are talking about and Laura's talking about tonight is true. It feels like I'm pretty far out on a limb as far as faith goes, which I'm not really comfortable with. I don't know if that makes any sense, if there's anything you can speak of to that.
Yeah. Believing in this only gets in the way. Having faith only gets in the way. What is being described is something that is here all the time. And it's not something that is so subtle that it's hard to ascertain or hard to experience. It's not at all subtle. As he puts it, it's monumental. It's the ground of what we are. The fact that you are constantly a conscious human being, conscious of one thing or another. And that consciousness, and it only gets interrupted when we go to sleep momentarily into dreams, and then we come back. That's like the clouds and the sun. It's temporary. But the very nature of what it means to be a human being is to be conscious and aware of something. And what that something is are the 6 possible knowables: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mind. And they occur within this space, which is like a big mirror, in which images arise and pass. So having faith is just irrelevant, and not more than irrelevant. It's actually a diversion. Having lack of faith is the same thing. It's another diversion. It's another sort of going off and losing track. But meanwhile, you're hearing what I'm saying. You're looking at your computer screen and seeing this image talking to you. One thing or another, we're always in this state. And this state is what we come back to from the dream. Doesn't matter what's in this state. It could be John Baker, it could be Kurt Steger, it could be your paintings, but we come back, coming back from the dream, and the most gripping kinds of dream, in fact, the very essence of all those dreams is self-doubt. The feeling, I'm not okay. I've got to get myself okay. That's the very core of all the dreams. You let that go, and there's just this. This is all that's left. Awareness of whatever happens to be arising and passing. Does that help?
I struggle with it.
I struggle to say it. It's so, we're talking about one of the most subtle and beautiful mysteries of existence, the very nature of our existence. It's hard to put into words.
Yeah, it's hard for me to grasp it, and I sometimes feel like I'm trying too hard, but there are times when it makes me feel really emotional. I just wish that I could understand or just be it, I guess. So,
Yeah, that's what we all want to do. That's the practice, is to just be it. And what stops us from being it is that feeling of, I'm not okay. I've got to make it better. I've got to fix it. And then we're in motion. We're on a forward lean, into some better place to be. And that's unhappy, because we feel like we're not in a good enough place. And we're lost in this dream of unhappiness and self-improvement. And then something happens. Somebody slaps us in the face, or we stumble on a rock, and we trip, and we come back out of the dream. And here you are. That's the action of meditation, really. Getting tripped up on a rock and coming back.
It may be the Western myth of accomplishment, that this is something to accomplish, Meg. That is keeping you from a direct experience of being.
Do you have a direct experience, Judith?
Not all the time, for sure. But more and more, I'm beginning to think that it's more of letting go of trying to achieve something. You know, that to allow yourself that makes it, you know, this simple thing that John and some of the others are talking about. That it's much simpler than we think. And we're so raised in the Western way of trying to achieve that needs to be let go.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's really, I'm reminded years and years ago, one time Rinpoche was giving a lecture, and he said the Buddha was a completely ordinary human being. And then he looked out at us and he said, you all want to be extraordinary. No.
Kurt, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, something that really helped me very early on in these teachings that really stuck with me is that I don't know, I think it was Barry. Someone said that it can be very boring to be in state of awareness, and you know, I struggle with that. That I have this expectation that being aware, well, you've also said that everything becomes more vivid and beautiful and extraordinary. And so I'm wanting that experience. And that typically is going to be an expectation and a letdown if I'm not getting that. But it is helpful for me to remember that a state of awareness can be extremely boring. You know, Judith said it once, you know, she's staring at her khaki colored corner. And there was something profound about that. That's, you know, I'm looking out at this same view, whether I'm in thought and dream or whether I'm in a state of awareness, what I am experiencing in these senses is the same. And it's I don't know, it helps me to realize that it can be just the same, you know, lack of a better word, is a boring view, that it doesn't change. And again, I think that speaks to what Judith was saying with our Western idea of accomplishing. And that accomplishment that I want is something extraordinarily beautiful rather than the same view that I have, whether I'm aware or not.
Christy?
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Laura. I really loved the pauses that you left us to just kind of aerate things. And I really appreciated that talk tonight so much. So yeah, my question is just about, yeah, Meg, what you're saying, and Kurt, and just in regard to like accomplishment and what happens. I've become pretty aware of like so this is a relative question. It's definitely in the relative. When the ego is tapped, and it comes from me like when I feel like, yeah, I'm not doing enough, or my ego is sort of trying to keep me safe, and I recognize that, and is saying, look, you're really getting out of bounds here. You're stepping into uncharted territory with like what you're doing in your job, or and I want to know what the teachings maybe, or maybe you can remind me of kind of what to do in the relative moment with that chatter in the mind, or and I've heard it's just really what to do with the ego in that moment, and what teachings say about that. I mean, I know, John, I've heard you say that Chögyam Trungpa like said, ego is a lie, and there's sort of like this tendency for me to kind of think of it as negative when it comes up, when I like hear that voice. And so I guess I need to be reminded of like what to do specifically, like when that chatter is coming up. And I recognize it as ego. And I just want to say you're a liar, you're but it feels really negative, and I don't, so anybody that has any help there on what to do in the moment when that voice is going of self-doubt, or clear ego talking.
Karen?
So when I'm on the cushion, and sometimes when I'm not, if I find myself often dream, I've realized that I've been often dream or thoughts, and I'm grateful, because in realizing that I was in dream, I'm now back. And that gentleness, this is only recent for me, but that gentleness is towards myself, and that gratitude for, you were away and now you're back. Cool. Is something that I just keep fostering, because the gentleness towards myself, and again, I wonder if this is ego, but that gentleness is home, makes me feel good. So that's just what happens for me. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Do you remember skywriters, planes that wrote messages in the sky? Smoke Camel cigarettes, remember that? I think thoughts are a lot like those messages in the sky. We see them and we follow them, and they disappear, just the way the smoke messages in the sky disappeared. And the sky is the bodhichitta, the awakened mind. The thoughts appear on it like figures on a ground, and then they dissolve. The sky never dissolves. It's always there, the bodhichitta.
We can't really like banish them away, or like
Then you've got another skywriting. Get away, you thoughts.
Got it. Okay. I needed to be reminded. I've been reminded.
Anyone else? No. I don't know. To me, this chapter was really stunning, especially this in the first part where he says, if I can find it, you are already fully developed. You do not need to be awakened. Ultimate bodhicitta means that you are eternally awake. It means that fundamentally, you have never gone to sleep. Whether you are asleep or awake, eating your breakfast, lunch, or dinner, whatever you are doing, you are always awake. That is ultimate bodhicitta. There's a passage you could put on your refrigerator.
So how does this relate to basic goodness? Is this a synonym for basic goodness? I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh,
He talks about that a little bit, doesn't he, in here? That basic goodness, this ground, the sky, call it the sky, bodhicitta, it contains basic goodness. It contains all that, the gentleness, it's the wholesomeness of existence. That it's fundamentally worth being here for, all of it. Not what we think about it, because that goes up and down, yes and no, reject and accept. But the very fact of being here for all of this, as it arises now in the present moment in bodhicitta, is worth being here for. And that's what I think basic goodness fundamentally means. That it's basically of value to be here.
oh, so it's a comment on the value
Well,
of
maybe.
existence. Is that what basic goodness is? Or
Can I
just-
say something about that?
Please,
Yeah.
and then Philip.
There's a section, I don't know exactly what page it's on, he calls gentle wakefulness. And he said the Sanskrit term bodhi means wakefulness, and those who have achieved bodhi are called Buddhas. Why are people awake, and why do we search for wakefulness? They are wakeful because they have decided to abandon aggression and its activities, both in themselves and towards others. That is the fundamental definition of bodhi, or wakefulness. When you are awake, you are no longer able or willing to cause harm to others. You are gentle.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Philip.
Sure. And so in total agreement with Dan and what others are saying, to help you, I'd bring you back to page 94, where he's talking about unconditional compassion. Just these 3 sentences from that first paragraph. Ultimate bodhicitta is an exploration of karuna, the noble heart of compassion. Our state of being, our basic nature, contains our capability for compassion. You could call it love if you like, but probably the best word would be gentleness. Such gentleness possesses intelligence and brilliance, or basic goodness. I mean, the words are words. This is really an essence. And as John has said so many times, the miracle is that that essence is already within us, whatever you choose to call it.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
Thanks, Philip.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Robert.
Thank you. For me, this chapter is knocking on a door that doesn't have a lock on it. And there really isn't a door. The door itself is just an illusion. There's a section of the Heart Sutra. Just a moment. No suffering, no cause or end to suffering, no path, no wisdom, and no gain. No gain, thus bodhisattvas lift this prajna paramita with no hindrance of mind. No hindrance, therefore no fear. Far beyond all such delusion, nirvana is already here. All past, present, and future Buddhas live this prajna paramita and attain supreme, perfect enlightenment. This chapter is ushering into this world. And the thing that keeps me from grasping it is thinking that there is an I, and that I has to be entertained by some idea that has something to do with something other than this. That there's some form of excitement. There's got to be something else. There must be something else. But there's just this. And it's not easy to accept that. But for me, it's like I was at a retreat Thursday, and it was the easiest one that I had been to. And you know what I kept hearing was, for myself, was when a thought came up, was just see it, and you're already back. I heard John, just see it, and you're already back. You don't have to deal with it. And what I realized was, what am I going to give ultimately my allegiance to? Is it this going on? Or is it just, wow. And in letting this go, so many other things opened up. It was amazing. The path, no cause, no end to suffering, no hindrance of mind, far beyond all such delusion. Nirvana is already here. Shut up.
Thank you, Robert. Well, friends, perhaps we should end. We're almost at 7. Excuse me, we're almost at 9, East Coast time. And we have a discussion group tomorrow, which ought to be fun on this subject. So, who is here? Christy, do you want to lead us in the dedication of merit? Wouldn't it be, what could be more appropriate than to dedicate the merit giveaway?
Yes, I would love to do that.
Okay.
Okay. You know what? I need to get my gong. Sorry, I thought I had it. Right here. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the rigged wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks,
All right,
Laura.
thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That was so well done. That was so well done.
Oh, beautiful.
It's
Yes.
it's such an opportunity.
Thank you,
Take-
Laura. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you. You said it.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, see you tomorrow.
Click the chat, click the chat. All right, nothing. All right, leave.
John, did you see what I was talking about finally with can't hear you, John.
Let's talk later.
Sure.
Bye.